It's time for me to go oval. Apparently everybody's doing it. Round is no longer acceptable, so oval it is. I got this absolute black chainring from pushes.com. Everybody's banging on about how good these are, what a difference it makes to your riding, you know, better climbing, better over technical climbs, all that sort of thing. I have had oval chainrings in the past, however, I don't think I installed it correctly. This is years ago, and it was back when I was doing cross-country riding, and I didn't honestly notice a difference with that particular setup, but I'm pretty excited to use this. This is already sort of foolproof. You can't get it in the incorrect position. It only goes one way, so it has to be timed to the crank because it's for that particular crank that I'm using. So as I said, it's absolute black oval chainring. It's 32 tooth and it's for a oval boost 148 DM N/W chainring for a SRAM crank, which is what I'm using on my bike. So yeah, so really excited to get it on, excited to give it a try and just see if it lives up to the hype. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to install it. We'll take you along for the install, and once it's installed we'll get out on the trail and we'll give it a try, and I can let you know how it goes. Just one thing before I install this, it's a little bit deja vu. I actually ordered and received one of these a few weeks ago, and I unboxed it and set up the camera. I was going to do exactly what I'm doing now, and got it out of the box, and disappointment soon set in because I realised I'd ordered the wrong chainring. These chainrings, there's quite a few different offsets. So when I talk about offset, I'm talking about the dishing. So if you put the chainring on a flat surface like so, dish side up, this gap here between the flat surface and the ruler is the dish or the offset of that chainring. There's a few different types, there's a few different offsets. So you've got to make sure when you're ordering a chainring, make sure that you get the right offset, especially for the SRAM cranks. So just a word of warning there for anybody that's thinking about ordering one of these chainrings, or even a round chainring, the offset, there's going to be an offset. Let's get into it. So as you can see, this is the SRAM dub crankset. You don't have to remove the whole crankset to get to the chainring. We just have to remove this side, so this crank only. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the pedal, get that out of the way, because this nut or bolt here in the center which holds the crankset together, usually they're really tight, and you need to get something onto this crank here, which I'll demonstrate in a little while, so that you can apply some leverage to undo that center bolt there. So let's get rid of this pedal first. So this pedal is on the right hand side, so it's a normal right hand thread, so I can just remove that just in the usual manner, like so. It was quite tight, so you've got to apply a bit of force to get that off. It's not ideal to do it in the stand actually. I prefer to remove pedals actually when the bike's on the floor. It's just easier, stops the bike from moving around so much. I'm going to have to take this chain guide off here. Yeah, so to take that off, there's just a couple of Allen bolts there on the top. And they're 5mm Allen bolts, so we'll just undo those. They're not tight. Things generally on bikes don't have to be that tight. as long as you keep up your maintenance and check that bolts haven't come loose from time to time, things will be okay. It's better not to over tighten bolts, especially if you've got a carbon frame like this, or even an alloy frame. Aluminium is quite soft, and you know, it doesn't like having bolts over tightened. So that's the chain guide, put that to one side. Now I'm ready to take this crank off here, off the centre. So that's a 8mm Allen key that goes in that centre, in the centre of the dub crankset there. The trick that I've got is just a piece of PVC pipe, an old offcut that I had, and that just slips over there really nicely. And so what that does, it allows me to apply some leverage so that I can undo this bolt here without much fuss, like so. So it'll undo, initially it will undo, and then it'll go a little bit tight, and the reason why it goes tight is it's got a little bit of a taper on the spline there, so that once you start undoing it, the bolt actually pushes against this crank and starts working a little bit like a puller, and it pulls it away from the crank there. So I can now remove that, don't need that anymore, and I can remove this chain, take the chain off the crank, and you can see there it's nice and loose. So I can remove that fully from the crank like so. I'm left with that. So the bike's obviously not being cleaned, so what I'll do is I'll just clean this area up here with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol, and just to make sure that no dirt or anything gets into these splines or into this bearing here. As I said earlier, I only have to take this side off. The other side can stay on. I've not adjusted the preload, so there's a preload adjustment that you can do on the other side of the crank, and if you leave that, don't mess with that at all. When we put the crank back on, the preload will still be set where it was set previous, and you don't have to take any time up setting that preload again. And you can see here on this side we've actually got torque drive screws. Now I don't know if it says on there what the T25, so they're T25 torque drive screws that we just need to remove, and then this chainring will come off. Okay, so that's nice and clean. Okay, this is now ready to receive this nice new chainring. Now it will fit in lots of different positions, but there's only one position which aligns with the 3 screws, okay, which is that position there. Okay, so make sure you've got it all clean, make sure there's no dags or anything on the back of the chainring that's going to stop it or make it not sit square. Once you've got that all dialed in, we can just simply fit that back on there. Now I have got some thread lock as well. I'm going to put a little bit of thread lock on these screws, and again I'm just going to give them a little bit of a clean just to make sure that if there's any grease on there or anything, that's not going to stop my thread lock from working properly. And we just apply not an awful lot. You just want a tiny, he only needs a tiny blob, like so. If you go overboard, it just makes a mess. So we just apply that tiny little bit. I'm not going to tighten that right up yet. I want to get these other screws seated first, so we'll go to the next one. Now there is a torque setting that is actually on my old crank here, and it's telling me to tighten it to 8 to 9 Newton meters. Okay, so just give them a little nip. I have got a torque wrench, so I'll torque them up to the correct setting. So they're all torqued to 9 Newton meters. So this is now ready to install back on the bike. Just got to make sure, just something to point out here, is this shiny area here on this crank. So you can see there's a spline in the middle where it can fit on the spindle. This shiny area here is the important bit. This is where the crank pushes on to the bottom bracket bearings, and if this surface here has got any dirt or grease or anything like that on there, that's going to change the preload setting on your crank when you reinstall it. As I said earlier, I haven't changed the preload adjustment at all, because if you don't touch it and you make sure that this is all clean and it can fit onto those two mating surfaces, can fit together as they should, there's no reason to adjust that preload. It will remain the same as it was before. So if it was good before, it saves you some extra steps in this process. If the adjustment wasn't to your liking, then it's okay to change your preload. However, there will be a few steps that aren't covered in this step-by-step tutorial. Okay, so I'm just going to apply a little light application of grease just on each one of these splines here, these round spots, and it's only a light application, it's not a lot, and the reason for that is just stops it from binding. It will stop it from binding on this spline, on this male spline on the spindle here, for when I want to remove that in the future. Once you're happy that it's all clean, you can position your crank to where it needs to be. So it will fit in different locations, so you've got to make sure obviously that it's at 180 degrees of each other. And now we need to tighten this to 54 Newton meters. Okay, and it's written on the crank there. 54 Newton meters is quite high. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. So I haven't applied any Loctite to this bolt here, 59 Newton meters. It's quite a high torque, and I haven't had any problems with these coming undone, so I'm not going to bother with any Loctite because they can be quite tight when you need to undo them. One thing I am just checking here, because this is an oval chainring, the diameter is going to be the overall, from, if you look at the oval part, if we measure from there to there, that is quite a bit bigger than the old 32 tooth chainring that I just took off. So I'm just making sure that I've got plenty of clearance between this high point and the frame, and it's not going to catch there on anything. Also my bash guard here, making sure that that's got plenty of clearance, and that's all looking good. It doesn't look like that's getting too close to the frame there. Looking great. The chain guide back on. Now this might need, you see here we've got different spacers on this chain guide. That might need to be changed due to the difference in dimension now because of the oval chainring, even though it's still 32 tooth. So we'll see how it goes. These can take a little bit of messing around with to get it in the sweet spot. I reckon it's going to need another spacer. Yeah, I reckon that's going to be catching. I might even just fabricate something up out of a little piece of aluminium. So these are the spacers. I just fab one of these guys up just so that we can get that to fit properly. So as you can see, I've just made another spacer there, just out of a little bit of clear plastic, and that should be enough to bring that up to give that chain clearance of this chain guide. So we'll just install him and see how it looks. Anything like this, it should go on really, screw down really easily. If it's hard, you know, stiff, it probably means that there's something not quite right. Might be cross-threaded on the screws. So you know, that's the time when you stop screwing it down and just back off and make sure that everything's lined up where it needs to be. Otherwise you can end up causing damage that could be very expensive. So I've got actually nice clearance there now. Yeah, that's just about perfect there, clearance wise. So all that I've got to do now is just adjust the clearance this way, so when it's in the bottom gear at the back, the chain actually moves across a little bit. So you have to make sure that you've got this chain guide in the center. So all you have to do that is just put it in the very bottom gear. Put it in your very bottom gear. And you can still hear that's just catching a tad. So my next step now is just to knock that over, actually knock it this way a little bit, just to give me a little clearance there when it's in the bottom gear. All that's left to do now is put the pedal back on. Just going to apply a little bit of grease, just a smidge. You don't want to over grease things, it doesn't need a lot. It's only to prevent things from seizing up and being a pain in the ass in the future. So once that's on there, get the Allen key again. And as I said, this is on the right side, it's a right hand thread. You can just nip him up. Like so. That's it. So I'm ready to roll. I'm ready to try this oval chainring. Exciting times. Well, that's it guys. The chainring is on and I'm excited to see how it will perform. However, this is going to be too long a video to test the performance as well. So there's going to be a part 2. Part 2 will be testing the chainring out on the trail, see how it performs and give you guys my honest opinion on whether it's worth going from the round chainring to the oval chainring. We'll see. Thanks for watching. See you next time.